The rain was falling hard that night, tapping against the kitchen windows like impatient fingers. I remember the smell of wet earth mixing with the soft scent of Merlot as Caleb poured 2 glasses. He smiled at me, that same soft smile that used to make my heart melt, and said, "Let's start over, okay?" His voice was calm, almost too calm. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think maybe things could go back to how they were before all the distance, before the quiet arguments and cold silences. I watched him set the glass in front of me, his hand brushing mine. His skin felt cold. I didn't think much of it. We sat across from each other at the table, the light from the kitchen flickering slightly from the storm outside. My sister Riley was there too, sitting at the counter, pretending to look through her phone but watching us from the corner of her eye. It felt strange. Why was she there for this fresh start? Caleb said she just stopped by to check on me, but something about the way she was acting made my stomach twist. I took a sip of the wine. It was my favorite brand, the one Caleb always got me on our anniversaries, but tonight it tasted off. A little bitter. A little sharp. I looked down at the glass, then at him. He didn't seem to notice. He was talking about plans for a trip, about maybe driving up north for a weekend to clear our heads. Riley laughed softly, but it wasn't her normal laugh. It was tight, forced, like she didn't know where to look. For a moment, I thought I saw something pass between them. A glance. Quick, nervous, almost invisible. But I caught it. Caleb's eyes met hers, and she looked away so fast it made my heart race. I didn't understand what it meant, but something inside me went still. I set my glass down, my fingers trembling just slightly. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air was heavy, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Caleb asked why I wasn't drinking. I said I just needed a minute, that maybe I was too tired. He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak. My chest tightened, a dull pressure spreading through my body. I thought maybe I was anxious, maybe imagining things, but then my vision blurred. I remember the chair scraping back as I tried to steady myself, my breath coming out in short gasps. The world tilted. I heard Riley call my name, her voice cracking. Caleb's footsteps came closer, but they sounded far away, like I was underwater. My throat burned. My hands shook as I reached for the counter, knocking over the wine glass. The red liquid spilled across the floor, mixing with the reflection of the kitchen light. That was the last clear image I had before everything went dark, the look on Riley's face. Not surprise. Not fear. Guilt. Pure, unmistakable guilt. And that's when it hit me, right before the blackness swallowed me whole. They hadn't wanted to fix things. They wanted me gone. 5 years before that night, everything in my life seemed perfect. I was 27, newly engaged, and completely in love with Caleb Mercer. He was warm, funny, and always knew how to make people feel comfortable. He built houses for a living and had that easy confidence that made everyone trust him. My friends called us the perfect couple. I believed them. I thought I had found the man who would protect me for the rest of my life. Riley, my younger sister, was my closest friend then. We grew up sharing everything: clothes, secrets, even dreams about what our weddings would be like. She cried when I asked her to be my maid of honor. She said she was proud of me, that Caleb was lucky to have someone like me. I didn't know that she meant it in a way that would later haunt me. Planning the wedding was one of the happiest and most stressful times of my life. Riley was always there, helping with flowers, tasting cakes, sending me photos of dresses she thought I'd like. Caleb would drop by when we were planning and joke with her about how dramatic I was when I got stressed. They laughed a lot together. I noticed, but at the time, I thought it was sweet that they got along. It made me feel lucky. My husband and my sister actually liked each other. Still, sometimes I'd walk into a room and feel something shift. Once, I found them standing close together in the kitchen, whispering about something. They both looked startled when I entered, like kids caught doing something they shouldn't. Caleb brushed it off, said they were planning a surprise for me. Riley blushed and said nothing. I believed them because I wanted to. That's what love does. It makes you blind in the kindest way. Our wedding day was beautiful. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and everyone kept saying how happy I looked. I remember catching Riley's eyes when I walked down the aisle. She smiled, but for a second, I thought I saw something behind it, something that didn't fit the moment. It was gone before I could name it. Later that night, during the reception, she danced with Caleb. They looked comfortable, too comfortable. My aunt even teased me about it, saying, "Looks like Riley's already claiming him as family." I laughed, but deep down, a small voice whispered that something wasn't right. After the wedding, life settled into routine. Riley still visited often, bringing coffee, helping me decorate our house. Caleb said she reminded him of me, just younger and louder. I told him that's because we grew up the same way. He smiled and kissed my forehead, and the doubt disappeared, for a while. There were little things, tiny, almost invisible moments. A pause too long when their eyes met, a strange silence when I walked into the room, a message from Riley late at night asking if Caleb was home. Each time, I convinced myself it was nothing. I told myself love was about trust. I told myself my family would never hurt me. I told myself I was imagining things. But I wasn't. It started slowly, so quietly that I almost didn't notice. Caleb began coming home later and later, saying work had gotten busy. At first, I believed him. He was a contractor, long hours came with the job. But something in the way he avoided my eyes when I asked questions made me uneasy. He'd drop his tools by the door, say he was too tired for dinner, and disappear into the shower without another word. The laughter that used to fill our house was gone. Even when he was home, he felt far away, like a stranger sleeping beside me. Then he started sleeping in the guest room. He said it was because he didn't want to wake me when he came in late, but that didn't make sense. I missed the sound of his breathing next to me, the warmth of him. When I tried to talk about it, he'd smile thinly and say I was overthinking. Those two words, "you're overthinking," became his favorite excuse. Around the same time, I started getting migraines. They came suddenly, pounding behind my eyes until I could barely stand. Riley began visiting more often, bringing soup or casseroles, telling me to rest. She said she was worried about me. I remember her voice, soft, caring, but there was always something off about her timing. She always showed up right when Caleb wasn't home, or just before he came back. Once, I woke up from a nap and found her in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She smiled and said she was making dinner for us. Her hands were shaking a little. My mother noticed the changes before I did. She called one afternoon after Caleb had missed another dinner. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "trust is a fragile thing. Don't ignore your gut." I laughed it off, said Caleb was just stressed. I told her Riley was helping out and everything was fine. But deep down, something in her words lingered. The house didn't feel like home anymore. Caleb's laughter was replaced by silence. His cologne, once comforting, started to smell foreign. I'd catch him staring at his phone, smiling faintly before quickly locking the screen. When I asked who he was texting, he said it was one of his workers. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe the man I loved was still there, under the exhaustion and distance. Riley started dropping hints about how men go through phases or how relationships get stale after a few years. I didn't understand why she said those things. It felt like she was trying to plant ideas in my head. One evening, she joked that if I ever left Caleb, he wouldn't stay single long. She smiled when she said it, but her eyes stayed cold. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the migraines were making me emotional. But every time I looked at them, Caleb and Riley together, I felt something dark move inside me. It wasn't jealousy. It was fear. Something was changing, and I couldn't stop it. That afternoon, the air was warm and quiet. Caleb had left for work early, and I decided to clean out his truck since it had been sitting in the driveway for days. He was always messy with his things, coffee cups, receipts, and old papers everywhere. I wasn't looking for anything, just trying to be helpful. I remember humming softly as I gathered the trash from the console. That's when I saw it, a small, crumpled pharmacy receipt wedged under the seat. It caught my attention because Caleb never picked up prescriptions. I smoothed the paper out, expecting to see something normal like painkillers or antibiotics. But the name on it stopped me cold. Digitalis. I didn't know much about medicine, but I'd heard that name before. It was for the heart. My pulse quickened as I stared at the label. Caleb didn't have any heart problems. Neither did I. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the paper, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was for someone else, I thought. Maybe he was doing a favor for a neighbor. But even as I tried to reason with myself, my chest tightened. Caleb wasn't the type to run errands for anyone but himself. And the receipt wasn't recent, it was dated a few weeks back. When he came home that night, I tried to act normal. We had dinner together, but I could barely eat. The receipt burned in my pocket, and every word he said felt fake. I waited until after he'd showered and sat on the couch watching TV before I asked. "Hey," I said casually, I found a pharmacy receipt in your truck. What's digitalis? He froze for a second, just a second, but I caught it. Then he smiled, that easy, careless smile he used when he was lying. Oh, that. It's for a neighbor's dog, he said. Old guy next door needed help picking it up. His tone was smooth, but it didn't match his eyes. I asked what kind of dog needed heart medication, and he laughed, brushing it off like I was being silly. The more he talked, the more certain I became that he was hiding something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Every strange thing over the last few months came rushing back. The bitter taste in my drinks, the way I felt dizzy after dinner sometimes, the new bottles of wine he insisted on opening himself. My stomach turned. The next morning, I started writing everything down. Dates, smells, what I ate or drank, when I felt sick. It made me feel crazy, but I needed proof. I started checking his truck more often, looking through drawers, watching how he moved around the kitchen. I didn't confront him again. Not yet. On the outside, I acted the same, quiet, trusting, even grateful when he brought me tea or poured me wine. But inside, I was watching every move, every word, every touch. I knew something was wrong. And I knew I had to be careful, because if Caleb was lying about that receipt, then I wasn't safe in my own home. The night began quietly, almost too quietly. Caleb said he wanted us to start over, to leave the tension behind. I agreed because part of me still hoped he meant it. He spent the afternoon cooking, steak, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal he used to make when we were happy. The smell filled the house, warm and familiar, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was off. I was setting the table when the doorbell rang. It was Riley. She smiled as if she belonged there, holding a bottle of wine in her hand. I thought I'd join you, she said. I was surprised but too tired to argue. Caleb didn't seem surprised at all. He just said, the more, the merrier, and took the bottle from her. I noticed the way their eyes met for a brief second before he walked back to the kitchen. That look made my chest tighten. We sat down to eat, the three of us. The storm outside had returned, rain tapping against the windows again, like it always did on nights when something bad was coming. Caleb poured the wine, filling each glass carefully. He handed me mine last, his hand brushing against my shoulder for a moment. Riley didn't look at me when she lifted her glass. The first few bites were good. Caleb talked about taking a trip, maybe going somewhere quiet near the coast. He sounded like the old Caleb for a moment, gentle, calm. I wanted to believe him. But halfway through the meal, a strange taste hit my tongue. The wine felt thicker, heavier somehow. My stomach turned, and a faint metallic bitterness lingered in my mouth. At first, I thought it was just my nerves. But then my throat began to tighten. The room felt hot, and my breathing became short. I tried to speak, but the words stuck. Caleb stopped talking mid-sentence, his face pale. Riley put her fork down and stared at me, frozen. I saw fear in her eyes, but not surprise. My hands began to shake. The fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the plate. The edges of the room blurred, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I gasped, trying to breathe, feeling the panic rise in my chest. Caleb moved toward me but hesitated, his face stiff and unreadable. Riley whispered my name, but she didn't come closer. Somewhere in the haze, I reached for my phone on the counter. My fingers barely worked, but I pressed the screen again and again until I heard the faint click of the call going through. The 911 operator's voice was distant, like an echo. I managed to whisper help before the phone slipped from my hand. The last thing I remember was the wine glass tipping over, red liquid spilling across the white tablecloth. Riley's voice was shaking, asking Caleb what to do. He didn't answer. My body felt heavy, my heartbeat slowing. My vision faded, and everything went dark. In that final moment, I understood the truth I had been avoiding for months. It wasn't stress. It wasn't coincidence. They had done this together. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the white hospital ceiling, and then Caleb's face hovering over me. His eyes were red, and tears were running down his cheeks. He held my hand tightly, whispering over and over how sorry he was. It was just an allergic reaction, he said, his voice trembling. The doctors said it could have been the wine. Nothing more. I stared at him, not moving, listening to his words. My body still ached, my throat sore, but I had survived. Somehow, I had survived. The doctors came in later, speaking softly, uncertain. They said there had been traces of some toxin in my system, something not natural, but the amount wasn't enough to kill me. They didn't know where it came from. I nodded along, letting them explain, but every word felt heavy in my chest. The police came by, polite, professional, asking questions. They suggested it was probably a case of food contamination, maybe spoiled wine. No arrests were made. No one suspected a thing. A few hours later, Riley walked in. She held a small bouquet of flowers, trying to smile, her hands shaking slightly. She sat by my bedside, saying how glad she was I was okay, how scared she had been. I noticed she wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. Her gaze kept dropping to her lap or to the floor. She tried to make small talk, asking if I needed anything, telling me she had spoken to Caleb and everything was handled. Her words were soft, careful, but I could feel the guilt radiating from her, even if she was trying to hide it. I wanted to say something, to confront them, to tell Caleb I knew the truth. But I didn't. I realized that if I wanted to survive this, I couldn't let them see that I knew. I had to act as if I believed their story. So I smiled weakly at both of them, thanked them for being there, and even made a joke about how dramatic the situation had been. I let Caleb hold my hand a little longer, let Riley arrange the flowers on the nightstand. I needed them to feel safe, to think they had fooled me. Lying felt strange, almost wrong, but I knew it was necessary. If they realized I was watching, planning, remembering every detail, there would be no coming back. I needed time. I needed space. And most importantly, I needed to stay alive while I figured out how to protect myself. When the nurses came back to check vitals, I forced myself to relax, to nod, to look grateful. Caleb kissed my forehead, promising he would never let anything happen again, and Riley smiled weakly, whispering that she was just glad I was okay. I let them believe it. They didn't know I was already thinking, already planning, already remembering every lie, every glance, every strange moment. They had set a trap, but I had survived, and now, I was ready to play my part. I knew I couldn't confront them without proof. They would lie, deny everything, and I would be the one who looked crazy. So I decided to hire someone who could uncover the truth quietly. Lena Dorsey was recommended by a friend, a private investigator, sharp, experienced, an ex-cop who didn't scare easily. I told her everything, the strange receipts, the bitter wine, the hospital visit. She listened without interrupting, nodding, asking precise questions. By the end of the meeting, I felt a small spark of hope. Lena got to work immediately. She followed Caleb and Riley without me knowing. Every move they made was tracked, documented, photographed. 2 weeks later, she called me with the first batch of evidence. My hands shook as she showed me the photos. Caleb and Riley were at a small cabin by the lake, holding each other too close, kissing in the morning light. The same smiles I had once trusted now looked deceitful, full of secrets meant to harm me. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was exactly what I needed. Along with the photos, Lena found receipts for the digitalist prescriptions. They weren't in Caleb's name. The name was fake, but the dates matched the times I had felt sick after meals. The proof was undeniable. She also recovered messages from Caleb's phone. One text made my blood run cold. After this weekend, it's just us. He was planning to be rid of me entirely, and Riley was part of it. I spent the night going over every piece of evidence. Each photo, each receipt, each text made everything clear. All the little signs, the late nights, the strange glances, the forced smiles, they all fit together now. They had been planning this for months, pretending to care while plotting something terrible. I could feel my anger building, but it was controlled, measured. I knew that if I acted recklessly, they would have the advantage. Instead of thinking about confrontation or revenge through violence, I started planning carefully. I had survived their first attempt. Now I could turn the situation into my own advantage. Every detail Lena had uncovered could be used strategically. I could let them think I was still trusting, still weak, still unaware. And when the time came, I could expose them completely. For the first time in weeks, I slept without fear. Not because I trusted Caleb or Riley, but because I had power now. Knowledge. Proof. The trap they had set for me had failed, but mine was still in place, growing quietly in the background. Every night, I pictured the moment I would finally reveal what I knew. It wouldn't be chaotic or angry. It would be precise. Perfect. And when it happened, they wouldn't have any way to hide. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to win. I drove to the cabin alone, my hands steady on the wheel. The place smelled like pine and old wood, a smell that had always calmed me when my father was alive. I moved quickly, doing things by habit. I cleaned the windows, checked the locks, and set 2 extra mugs by the fireplace so it would look like a casual weekend. Under the sink I found a small toolbox and from it pulled tiny, unremarkable things: suction mounts, a couple of clear lenses, adhesive tape. I worked fast and quiet, placing the little lenses where they would catch the kitchen and the dining table but stay out of sight. The screens were small, hidden in a drawer, but I had a tablet ready to watch them without being seen. I packed food I knew they liked and left a note that made the weekend sound like forgiveness and fresh starts. When they arrived, I greeted them with a smile that felt like armor. Inside, my heart was steady. I was calm on purpose. I made coffee, poured 3 drinks, and let the conversation roll. There were jokes about the road, polite smiles, and the small, sharp silences I had learned to read. They tried to act normal. I answered with soft talk and empty laughter so they would let their guard down. While we ate, I kept my attention on little things: the way Caleb reached for the salt, the way Riley pushed her hair away from her face. I watched them laugh, sound it out, pretend. Then I let them toast. I listened to Caleb's words, the clink of glass, the breath that followed as he leaned back. Inside, I felt only the cool patience of someone who had waited a long time. Later, the room changed. Riley's face drained of color. She moved to the sink and held her stomach like she'd been surprised by a sudden illness. Her voice came out small and sharp as she asked Caleb for water. He looked frantic in a way he had never been when I saw him tense with work, hands shaking, voice high, calling for help. He fumbled with his phone as if he couldn't remember numbers. For a moment, both of them looked terrified and helpless, and I sat very still, watching, feeling no gloat, only a tight, clear sense that things were finally unraveling. I went to the sink as if to help, as if I was worried. I steadied Riley's hair back, held a glass to her lips, and listened to their panicked plans. I moved calmly, keeping one hand on the counter so it looked like I was supporting her. All the while my other hand brushed the table edge where I had set a small jar, an unassuming jar into which I quickly scooped a swab from the rim of one of the glasses. The movement was casual. No one noticed. When the call for emergency help went out, I stayed composed. I told the paramedics what I could, gave them the jar, and watched them work. Later, when the local officers arrived, I offered them the tablet and showed them the footage I had recorded. My voice didn't shake as I replayed the moments: ordinary gestures, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, hands that lingered too long. They watched in silence, and their faces changed. That night, when the house was quiet and the rain started again, I sat alone on the porch and let the cold wind on my face. I wasn't satisfied. No one who survives something like that ever is. But I was no longer helpless. I had given them a taste of their own cruel plan, and I had proof that would not vanish. I slept with the knowledge that my quiet work had shifted the balance, and for the first time since I had found that receipt, I felt a small, weary peace. The day I walked into the police station, my hands were steady, but my stomach was tight. I carried a folder with everything Lena had collected: photos, receipts, text messages, and notes I had taken for months. I also had the new footage from the cabin, the proof of their panic and fear, every moment caught without their knowledge. I felt the weight of it, the power it gave me, but also the exhaustion of carrying months of fear and suspicion alone. I handed the folder to the detective who had been following up on my allergic reaction case. His eyes widened as he skimmed through the contents. He asked questions, not about my feelings, but about facts, dates, times, explanations for the receipts, the prescription, the messages. I answered calmly, precisely, letting them see that nothing was missing, nothing forgotten. Every detail fit together, building a picture they could no longer ignore. Within 2 days, officers arrived at my front door with warrants. I watched them take Caleb and Riley into custody. Their faces were pale and frozen, trying to hide the shock but failing. Caleb's jaw was tight, and Riley's eyes darted everywhere, as if searching for someone to blame. I stood in the doorway, watching silently. Part of me wanted to feel relief, a sense of justice, but instead, I felt a hollow emptiness. The betrayal had cut deeper than anger or fear. It had shifted something inside me. The people I trusted most, the 2 I had thought would protect me, had planned my death. That kind of hurt doesn't vanish with arrests. I realized the world I had known, full of simple faith in family, love, and honesty, no longer existed. Watching them handcuffed, I didn't scream or cry. I didn't even feel satisfaction. I felt aware, alert, cautious. My life had changed, and nothing could undo it. The police asked me to provide statements over the next few days. I did, repeating the story over and over, calm and steady. Each time I spoke, I noticed how the officers' faces shifted, first disbelief, then concern, then recognition of the calculated plan Caleb and Riley had set in motion. I handed over the footage again, knowing it would seal their fates, knowing it was the truth that mattered more than any emotional reaction I could have had. In the evenings, I sat alone in my house, replaying moments in my mind. Their glances, the laughter that had never been real, the wine I had been forced to drink. I thought about the time I had spent pretending, watching, planning. I had survived, and I had played my part perfectly. But survival came with a cost. Trust, once broken this deeply, doesn't come back. It shifts something in your heart. By the time the officers left and the handcuffed figures disappeared from sight, I felt the quiet weight of what had happened. Justice had begun, but my world would never feel the same. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes the way you see everyone around you, even yourself. I had learned that lesson too late to avoid the pain, but early enough to protect myself from ever being powerless again. A year had passed since that night, and my life had changed completely. I moved to a small coastal town in Oregon, a place where the ocean roared and the air smelled of salt and pine. The house I lived in was modest, quiet, and far away from everything that reminded me of Caleb and Riley. Most nights, I would sit on the porch, listening to the waves, letting the wind clear my mind. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was calm, a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. I still flinched when someone poured me a drink. Even water made me pause sometimes, a reflex I couldn't shake. The memory of the wine, the dinner, and the betrayal lingered. But over time, I learned that peace didn't come from revenge or punishment. It came from knowing I had survived, from knowing I had protected myself, and from understanding that fear no longer controlled me. The trial had been difficult but necessary. Caleb and Riley were sentenced to 18 years each. I didn't testify to make them suffer. I testified so I would never have to wake up afraid again. Each word I spoke was careful, measured, and meant to make sure justice was served, not to satisfy anger. I watched from the courtroom as they were led away, their faces pale and defeated. Part of me wanted relief, but the stronger feeling was quiet resolve. I had regained control over my life. In the months that followed, I slowly built routines. I bought a small house near the cliffs where I could see the water from the kitchen window. I worked part-time at a local bookstore and spent mornings walking along the beach, letting the rhythm of the waves calm the racing thoughts that sometimes came back. I kept a journal, not to dwell on the past, but to remind myself how far I had come. Writing each day helped me process the fear, the betrayal, and the moments of doubt I had carried for so long. Sometimes, when it rained, I could still hear that toast in my mind. The one Caleb had made that night, the one that had disguised the betrayal, to starting over. I would close my eyes and let the memory float, but now it didn't sting. Instead, I smiled quietly, because I had survived, because I had started over on my own terms, not theirs. I knew I would always carry pieces of that life with me. The wariness, the memory of deceit, but I also knew I could choose how to live going forward. I was learning to trust myself again, to feel safe, and to enjoy small things without fear. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was mine. Some nights, I still sit by the window, listening to the rain and the waves, and I let myself smile. Not for revenge, not for justice, but for survival. For being here. For knowing that, despite everything, I had started over, and this time, it was truly my life.